I spent 30 years hiding my smile. I've wanted so badly to fix it over the years, but I'd never let myself. This year, my 40th on the planet, that finally changed. And what I learned about the prisons that we build for ourselves, I think it might help you too. So this whole YouTube thing, I started it decades ago in college, really, when YouTube was first coming out, 2006, 2007. And I never took it very far. It was something that was kind of experimental in those years. And it's always been a nugget in the back of my head, though, it's always been something that's sort of gently pulled, kind of reminded me from time to time, that maybe you should go back and try that. Had a couple of videos that did really well back in those days. It's always been kind of a regret of mine that I never tried to fully lean in. So this year begins, 2025, and I found it resurfacing again, And I decided to take it seriously, that sort of tap on the shoulder that I received. That led to the channel that you're looking at here, and there's a couple other channels that I've experimented with. But over the course of this last year, I've basically been teaching myself how to do YouTube, right? There's so much to it. There's titles and thumbnails, there's content, editing, and there's scripting and learning how to talk to a camera, all that kind of stuff, right? I was just absorbing all of that and just trying my best to build something and just take a good swing at it. And one thing that I had to confront in this process is the video editing takes a long time, right? So I found myself having to stare at my face all day. And that's not something I'm used to doing. And over the course of the weeks and months, as I was refining my editing strategies, I started noticing a discomfort that kind of was creeping in. I recognized that discomfort came from my teeth. Funnily enough, I've hated my smile my entire life. I have had this one crooked tooth right here, and I had really gappy, spacey teeth, and they came in that way whenever my adult teeth sort of settled in, probably in, early teenage years, right? But even before that, I had like little tiny chiclet spacey teeth, genetic, I think my dad had them like that. But I realized that I had this fear about my smile, this dissatisfaction my whole life, really. And at this point, 40 years old, it's so ingrained in me. So I grew up in a lower middle class household, a divorced household in Southern Illinois in the 90s and early 2000s, really. Having the means that we did, or didn't, I should say, there were tiers of problems that you concerned yourself with, and then there were sort of secondary tiers and tertiary tiers that you didn't even speak of, really, right? Cosmetic problems was certainly one of those lower tier problems that it was never even on the table to solution. So I kind of learned early on that my smile and my appearance were kind of what they were, and that's the way it was going to be. Consequently, being a curious and growing and sensitive teenager, I noticed other people's circumstances, right? And I very quickly grew to kind of recognize all the braces that kind of were surrounding me, in those high school years especially. And I grew to be really envious of those kids that got to have the braces. I imagine it has to be sort of a paradox in the other direction, right? You'd be so sensitive growing up about your appearance, and braces are probably seen as this kind of marring of your sort of appearance, right? But I saw it completely differently. I saw that as opportunity, as hope, as a status symbol, really. I always just dreamed of getting braces, one day, and I never believed that would ever be possible for me, certainly as a kid with no money and means myself. Over time, even as I went into college and started figuring out how to make money and studying a profession and entering kind of young adulthood, I put this concern of mine into my subconsciousness, right? Into my subconscious space as all the other adult problems started kind of creeping in. The need to kind of make your mark and prove yourself and carve out some niche in your sort of life. But looking back, I can really understand how my relationships and even my perception and perspective on life was really shaped by this central concern that I had had about my smile. I look back on photos, in my younger years and notice that I never show my teeth, like ever. There's not a photo that I've been aware of and consciously was presenting myself for where I showed my teeth ever. It meant that I sort of muted my personality in a lot of ways, especially with new people. I could only show up so fully because I was afraid to be fully known, because I was afraid of being judged for my appearance and for the things that I hated about myself, I'd essentially resigned myself to a version of life, a vantage where I was more outside looking in than inside participating, right? I was really observant, but I was really reluctant to participate. So as I got out of college and sort of carved out a professional identity as a software engineer and even moved away from my home and established my own circumstances as a responsible adult, I never even considered fixing this fundamental problem. Firstly, it was just that ingrained mentality that you don't spend money on non-vital problems, right? And I got more and more terrified of going to the dentist because I knew that they would reaffirm this need that I had to resolve this problem that I, at this point, had now become absolutely terrified of resolving. Who would I be without this weight that I had been bearing so long, Like, if I did even fix this, right? What would I look like? Who would I be on the other side of that? At this point, nearing 40, my identity is firmly established. My brain is like cemented, right? My personality is what it is, isn't it? So let's cut to August this year. And I have one of my 6-month cleaning appointments at the dentist. And they give me a 3D scan. And they suggest to me after this scan that my alignment on my molars, they're finally causing some real structural damage. And it's more than a recommendation. It's a priority that they want to put in front of me, that I should get Invisalign. Now, I think what had happened at this point was I had seen myself on camera enough times to remember this problem in my conscious mind. It's not just a part of my bedrock foundation personality. It's now in the front of my mind that this is a concern of mine. Not just fundamentally, will I keep my teeth, but just all this trauma that I had had as a kid growing up, going through life, being concerned with how I'm perceived. And so with all of these things kind of swimming and getting this presentation from my dentist, I find myself saying absolutely yes without even too much thought. 3 weeks later, I'm slipping on my first set of aligners, kind of walking out of the dentist going, wow, there was a lot of nervousness leading up to that and a lot of unpacking I had to do to kind of prepare myself. And the actual process didn't take very long at all. It was less than an hour I was in there. And then I was out and kind of going through this process, They had told me it would be 19 trays, one a week. It's a little less than, I don't know, less than 6 months for sure, right? And I found that really kind of staggering that this problem that I had seen as such this massive mountain to scale in the scope of maybe one season of a year, it could be behind me. Well, last week I woke up and I'm on tray, I think it's 13 of the 19, right? And up to this point, there'd been subtle changes, but nothing kind of massive. It's, things generally started to feel a little bit more closely knit. My bite was certainly changing and not sure for the better necessarily. It was kind of in that awkward middle phase, But tray 13 happens and I go to sleep. I sleep overnight in the first day that I put them on. I put them on right before sleep so that I don't have to deal with the biggest pain points early on. I just take an aspirin and go to sleep. And I've already got 8 hours clocked in on the new tray by the time I wake up. So I wake up and I head downstairs to take my aligners out so that I can go have my coffee. And that's when I take a look at myself in the mirror and I notice that the gaps in my front teeth have fully closed. I still have many trays left at this point, so I really wasn't expecting this to be the case this early, It's It's only been 3 months at this point, essentially, right? I could not have prepared myself for the moment that, sorry, I'm just going to get a little emotional. I looked in the mirror and I recognized that this weight that I had been carrying for 30 years had been left behind me. And staring in that mirror, in that morning light, seeing my smile for the first time, is when I realized something really important. The key to the prison cell that I had made had been in my pocket the whole time. So often we resign ourselves to limitations and circumstances of our own construction. All we need in order to escape is to simply give ourselves permission to do so. So, my plea to you, parent to child, child to parent, human to human, if you've been denying yourself, recognize that. And once you do recognize that, reach into your pocket, find the key that's there, grab it, pull it out, insert it into the lock in the door in front of you, turn the key in the lock, and push.